Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching News in Depth. This weekend, Serbia may face the biggest protests in its modern history, with thousands gathering on the first anniversary of the Novi Sad canopy collapse, which killed 16 people. What will it lead to? And what should we expect? And should we expect snap elections? We'll talk about it with our very own Balkans correspondent, Paweł Trzaskowski. Good afternoon, Paweł.
Hello, Maciej. Good to be here.
Good to have you with us. So, tell us more about this Saturday protest. What should we expect to happen?
Well, we observe at the moment a momentum is growing. There are groups, large groups of Serbian protesters marching to Novi Sad, the second largest city in Serbia, and they are marching, some of them from very distant parts of the country, some 400 kilometers away, to take part in November the 1st protest, which will be the first anniversary of mass protests that erupted exactly a year ago in Serbia. Protests that oppose what the protesters believe is state capture and corruption of the ruling party, SNS party, and the country's president, Aleksandar Vučić.
I see. Now, as you said, the protests have been ongoing for the last year. What's the current state of affairs in Serbia? I mean, how is it affecting, the everyday life of Serbians and also the country's economy?
Well, the protest caused the Serbian society to divide on a scale probably unseen since the breakup of Yugoslavia, since Serbia became a singular country. And now you can see two very clear groups. One is the protesters, which the protest movement initially started as a student movement, but then it grew, encompassing other spheres, other areas of professions in Serbia. And the other group is the staunch supporters of the ruling Serbian Progressive Party. And the protests have been ongoing for a year with varying intensity. They have been very calm and orderly at the very beginning, and sometime around spring this year, violence appeared during this protest. Now the situation is rather calm, given what we saw over the summer, for example, but also given the massiveness of the protests that we are expecting to see, the demonstrations we're expecting to see on Saturday, a lot can happen. I mean, probably we might witness the biggest demonstration in the modern history of Serbia. Who knows?
These protests are quite emotional, not only because of the nature of what led to the protests. I mean, the great tragedy for the families of the 16 victims of the Novi Sad canopy collapse, but also for many other reasons. Now, I'd like us to listen to the mother of one of the victims killed in the Novi Sad roof collapse. Let's give it a listen.
As for the tragedy, it is indescribable. The anguish and grief are beyond description. And as for the state, I'm extremely enraged. I'm very enraged, deeply disappointed, and I feel profound bitterness towards the government. I'm only interested in justice. I want to know who killed my child. No one can bring me back his 27 years of life. No one can bring me back one of his phone calls or messages, or when he said to me, "Mum," which is worth a fortune. That's why I'll be after them as long as I live. As long as I stand on my feet, I won't give them peace. They will be held accountable for this, because this is a crime.
Paweł, as long as I stand on my feet, I won't give them peace. They will be held accountable for this, because this is a crime. What crime exactly was the mother of one of the victims talking about?
Well, she is referring to the Novi Sad tragedy. Well, it wasn't just an incident, because Novi Sad is Serbia's second largest city, and in Novi Sad you have a major railway station, a part of a larger railway connection that was being renovated for several years. And last year it had only been operational for half a year after a major renovation, and then the concrete canopy of this railway station suddenly collapsed, tragically killing 16 people. And that's why the protests erupted, because people thought that that was a catalyst of people's anger with corruption, with state capture, and
But was it ever proven that, in fact, corruption or on a mass scale led to this catastrophe?
Well, that's one of the protesters' demands, that they say, please show us the papers, show us all the documents, renovation documents, because we would like to see whether that was done properly, whether, no money was stolen while doing this. Sometime at the end of last year, the government did provide some papers. However, the representatives of the protester side say there are not enough. We don't have enough evidence. So it was not proven, but there is a strong suspicion still that is not satisfied within the protest movement. That's one of the demands, because another demand is snap elections, because protesters say that we are being treated so unfairly and this government is so corrupt that we need a change and we need snap elections. And of course, the government is unwilling to bow down to these demands.
Let's then listen to one of the protesters preparing for the big weekend rally. Let's give it a listen.
You come to realize that somehow your whole life has changed, that you'll never be that same little person again, but that you have to be careful what you do in life, that you're somehow under the watchful eye of the public, that you've received so much media exposure. I've been receiving daily death threats and threats of expulsion from the country. I've been receiving horrible phone calls. People have been approaching me on the street and so on, but I have to say that in these dark times, since people mostly think that I'm constantly experiencing unpleasant situation, they're still incomparable to the many pleasant situations I have, to the many people who actually support everything that my colleagues and I do.
So this is one of the protesters which faced all the might of Vucic's regime, right? And she's still resolved to continue her struggle.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to give it to the protesters that they're not giving up easily. That particular soundbite that we listened to, it comes from a woman who was sexually harassed by the police during this violent period of protests. And she, as we heard, she still vows to continue her fight, as do hundreds of thousands probably of protesters that are going to be there on the 1st of Saturday. But, we talked about this violent side, but on the other hand, we have this duality, that we had this brutal period of protests, and now you see students marching 400 kilometers. Before we had some sort of a happening where a group of students was actually cycling from Novi Sad to Strasbourg to make their case heard in the European Union. Sometime around February, they organized a protest during which they blocked a major bridge in Novi Sad for 24 hours. So there is always, you can see that these are protests organized by the young generation, because they always have this happening style attitude there, a bit mocking the government, and this is why you see this very clear division in the Serbian society now. There's this youthful protesters and the staunch supporters of Alexander Vučić.
And yet, as you said, violence, even if not, present all the time, is still there, and sometimes rears its ugly head. Now, how to explain Alexander Vucic's reaction to the shooting incident?
Well, we have
that took place not that long ago. He was quite calm about it.
Well, we have to first remind what it was all about, because in Belgrade, the country's capital, you have a tent camp, and this tent camp was organized by the supporters of the ruling Serbian Progressive Party, and they camped there opposing the protests that are somewhere else on the streets. And a week ago, there was a shooting near this tent camp, and the perpetrator, also set one of the tents on fire. He was then immediately caught by the police, and judging by the video released by the Serbian authorities. He could have had some mental issues because when he was asked why he did that, he said, "I wanted you, the police, to kill me." And Alexander Vucic's response was actually rather reserved, given the rhetoric that we are used to hearing. Can we play the?
Yeah. We'll show it now.
Ispred Doma Narodne skupštine Republike.
Today, in front of the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia, Vladan Anđelković, born in 1955 in Belgrade, a resident of Stari Grad, committed a heinous terrorist attack against people and property. This is my political assessment and, I would say, an assessment of a very good lawyer. The attack also caused a general threat, and ultimately the definitive legal formulation and qualification of the act will be determined by the relevant prosecutor's office.
How strong is President Vucic's position within the Serbian society? What's his public support?
Well, it's basically reflected in the division of Serbian society that we talked about. I mean, he's strong enough not to call for snap elections immediately and not to bow down under the protesters' demands. He still has a very large support group, and this is why I think we're not going to see snap elections anytime soon. Vucic himself mentioned a couple of months ago that maybe there will be earlier elections, but not snap elections, maybe sometime, by the end of 2026. But my bet is that they will happen sometime next year, and probably in the most opportune moment for Vucic's party. Because Vucic, with the general elections, after that there will be also presidential elections. Vucic can no longer run for president. He is now nearing his second term as president, and now all he does probably is the preservation of the support of his party.
Mm-hmm. But who can challenge his party's rule?
Well, that's what we see with the protest movement. Probably what we witness at the moment is the creation of the new Serbian opposition and the people in the streets. However, after a year, the protest movement still has no clear leadership. They have not decided to form a political entity, a formal political entity. One of their fears is that if they do so, then the movement will be politicized, and then it will become an easier target for attacks coming from the Serbian Progressive Party. But the other thing is that maybe they are hoping for snap elections to happen soon, and then they will create their structures. They do say that they will take part in the elections.
But what do protesters have in common? I mean, apart from this one demand, Vucic must go, and the fight against corruption, because it seems that there's no clear political agenda.
Well, I believe if the current protester opposition is formed, they are not going to present a drastically different political agenda internationally than what Vucic is presenting at the moment. Because if you go to these protests, you don't see the flags of the European Union there. They are not decisively more pro-European than Vucic.
This is quite, peculiar, because what we are used to when we're watching some protests.
Go to Slovakia, for example. Yeah.
Precisely, across Europe and also, in countries that want to join the EU. It's mostly young people protesting against the government stalling, the accession process. Let's call it that way. So Serbia is different.
Serbia is different. Like what we mentioned, Slovakia, right? You have Fico, and the protests, the monthly protests, are openly pro-European and anti-Russian. Take Moldova, for example, right? You had two very different camps. One was pro-EU and one was pro-Russian. In Serbia, it doesn't look like that. In Serbia, you have this Serbian politics that is constantly playing on two pianos. One is the European Union one, and the second one is Russian. It all stems from two factors. One is turbulent history of the country. Serbia, for example, still holds a grudge with the Western countries because of Kosovo. But the other one is energy dependence on Russia, and the fact that Serbia can't still shake that dependence.
Well, that is maybe about to change, as the US Treasury Department is putting pressure on Belgrade to nationalize the Nish oil company, which would effectively release Serbia from the Russian energy grip. Now, talking about these international relations, is there... I mean, can Serbia really afford, its stance of a fence sitter when it comes to relations between Russia and the West? And if indeed the opposition wins the next parliamentary election, can they still play the same cards that have already been used by the current president?
I think Serbia, is slowly but steadily drifting towards Europe. Ursula von der Leyen was in Belgrade about 2 weeks ago, and she said that Serbia has to finally decide whether they want to join the bloc or not, because they are the EU candidate. However, you've had this protest for a year now, and you have not seen a very visible voice of support coming from Brussels, the support for the protesters. And this is because the European Union still believes that they can talk to Vucic, and if there is no Vucic, then, and for example, if a new leader of the country emerges from the protest movement, this leader will be just, repeating similar lines when it comes to EU accession. Yes, we would like to, but we have this Russian dependence that we have to get rid of.
So the devil you already know is better than the unknown one. This is strange, because it seems that Alexander Vucic has in fact been stalling the EU integration process in Serbia for many years. I mean, now he has this. He presents himself to be a pro-European leader, but the facts speak against him.
Serbia was actually quite close, got an inch closer last year, just before the Novi Sad tragedy, because if you remember, Donald Tusk was actually in Serbia talking to the country's president Alexander Vučić about possible EU accession. That was one of the ideas of Polish presidency of the European Council. Let's push the accession envelope forward in the Western Balkans. But at the same time, when Tusk was speaking to Vučić, the country's prime minister was in Moscow. But as I said, Serbia got an inch closer, but then the Novi Sad tragedy happened, and Vučić had to deal with a storm in Serbia rather than, think of some project of joining the European Union, because, as we mentioned already, he is fighting for his political survival, or the survival of his political party.
TVP World's Balkans correspondent Paweł Trzaskowski was our guest today.
Pleasure as always.
It was a great conversation, in fact, Paweł. Thank you very much. And thank you for watching, and stay with us for more interviews here on TVP World.